Rick, are you there?
I am here, and I see that Steve has our presenter has dropped off or needs to enter a PIN number. So I'm going to let you work with Steve for just a moment while I tell you a little bit about our presenter for today. We are very excited about, first of all, this presentation. We had the opportunity to get in contact with LifePosts very early on. They're a startup organization, and Steve Waldman, our presenter, comes from a very interesting background. He'll tell you a little bit more about himself, but the way he looks at telling stories, both written and spoken, and the photo stories that people have in their pictures is just amazing, and we asked him to join us today to help share a little bit about what he's doing in his space, and you're going to be very amazed with how the types of technological advances that he's bringing to bear to tell stories in a unique way and build a mosaic for folks. So I'm hoping we have Steve on the line. Steve, are you there? James, can you see what you can do about getting Steve on the line? I saw him pop up. Let me send him Steve. We sent you an audio pin if you back in. Happy holiday season for that, and Happy New Year. So let's see here if Steve, moment, and we'll see here. James, Steve?
Hey, Steve is in the process of logging back in there. It looks like he...
Oh, okay.
Off for a second, but he's coming shortly here.
That for the running. I say Steve is back on, and he's coming up here. Hopefully we'll get his audio up here in a moment, and we'll be all set. So. Okay.
I think he's going to have to enter that PIN, or he could just go computer audio.
Okay. Steve, if you've got that PIN number to get in, or you've got audio, we're seeing your screen absolutely perfectly fine. We just need to get your voice in here so you can fill us in about what you've been doing in this special space that you're building. Okay, Steve, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
We've got you, Steve. Perfect.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much. Sorry for the inconvenience, folks, but let me introduce again Steve Waldman, and Steve, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry about that. Well, yeah, I come at this from a bit of an unusual perspective. I was a journalist by trade. I was national correspondent for Newsweek, and then I started a company called BeliefNet, which was the largest multi-faith religion and spirituality website. And in recent years, I've been working on problems of local news, of the collapse of newspapers and what happens in communities when the newspapers get small or weak or bad. And I was working on that set of problems when my something else happened, which is my wife, who was also a writer, became a funeral director. It was about 5 years ago, and a very interesting career change. And she would come home with stories of the families she was working with, and they were just over and over again incredible stories about really interesting people and the families and what they'd done in their communities. And I would always ask if there was something I could read about them, and she would usually say no. And this happened over and over again, and I started to realize that this thing that I'd been studying, kind of the changes in local news media, had another side effect, which was that newspapers were eliminating their staff-written obituaries and also raising prices on their death notices, the paid death notices. So that's kind of what drew me into this place. I started looking at death notices and realized that the world of kind of memorialization, online memorialization, was really sort of stuck in the past. And given that this is like the most important type of story you can tell and the most important story in people's lives, that seemed like a real tragedy. And then from there, it kind of expanded out to realizing that there were similar problems with celebrations and life milestones in general, and the capturing the stories of the most important people in our lives. It's sort of a weird moment because there's actually no shortage of ways of taking pictures and storing them, but it's like the attic has become the new, the cloud has become the new attic, and it's not actually all that easy to curate and tell these stories. So we approached it from the perspective of how do you make some tools that would make it easier for people, regular people, not professional storytellers, to tell the stories of the most important people in their lives and the most important moments in their lives. And recognizing that for most people, a blank page is intimidating. So how do you make it so it's a little bit easier to do? And so we built a set of tools, LifePosts. We launched in February, and I'm going to just show you quickly a couple of the tools that are geared around trying to make it easy for people to tell stories, often with photos as kind of the centerpiece. So one tool we have is called Life Cues, and it's a question and answer prompt system. And when you first get to LifePost, it actually wouldn't look like this. It would look like you'd have blank questions that we've pre-populated. Here we go. It would be like these gray areas that you scroll over. And LifePost has pre-populated those, and they differ depending on what the life milestone is. So the questions for a wedding will be different from a memorial, and the questions for pets will be different for humans. And you can also pick your own questions. So in this case, I actually edited these questions to make it so that they worked better with the photos I had. So in this case, I kind of went backwards. I have all these pictures of the dog in crazy positions, so I'm going to say, what yoga positions does Chester know, and do it that way. What are the artsiest photos of Chester? And then within each one of them, there's in effect kind of unlimited number of galleries that you can do. These are the artsy photos of Chester. And so the point of this was to make it easy to organize. You know, you have, when you're talking about a memorial, having the life cues makes it easier for people to get started. So, for instance, if you're intimidated by the need to write a whole big thing, or you're afraid, you know, it's going to take too long, or you don't have your material yet, just start off answering a couple questions. So like here, you know, what did William teach you? That's one that you can just write a sentence. You don't have to write a whole essay. It also is very good for collaborative storytelling. So in this case, you can see the question that they did about his Greek heritage became kind of the place for all the comments and jokes and stories from various family members and friends about his Greek heritage, and including the trips to Greece and that kind of thing. And you can intersplice or intersperse photos and text. So the life cues is kind of one way that we came up with to kind of break it down, make it easier to organize, make it easier to tell stories. Another tool that we came up with is called Life Timeline. And this is broken down into time moments, events. And it makes it, again, easier to feel like you don't have to do this all at once. Just pick a date, pick an important moment, and go from there. And it can be PDFs, videos, photos, and you can have multiple photos within a given time event. So it's a little like a scrapbook, but it's organized in a timeline format, which I think makes it cleaner and easier to organize things. In all of these cases, you can do whatever media format you want. In other words, pictures, videos, audio, PDFs. And in all of these, you can also add, other people can add contributions. So we tried to make this something that can be collaborative when you want it to be. So, you know, in this case, Luke Buttry made this thing, but he could have other members of the, I'm sorry, Steve Buttry made this, but he could have other people, other people come in and help. And then the third tool is, in some ways, the least original and straightforward. It's a kind of an article template, and here the goal was to make it look really nice. Because if you look on, you know, newspaper websites or for death notices, it's just not very appealing. And we felt like people ought to be able to create beautiful magazine articles for their loved ones very easily. And you can alternate text and photos, so that actually is a bit more flexible than Facebook in that way. And it makes it much easier to tell stories that way, or tell someone's life story. Now, people are using this. You can also here see embed social media embeds as well. These are tweets and Instagrams. Now, people are using this in all sorts of different ways. The original way we kind of envisioned this was around telling, you know, the story of someone's life. But people are coming up with all sorts of creative uses that are fascinating. So, like, this group used the timeline tool to do a travel journal using the timeline part, and it was a way of organizing their memories and their descriptions and their photos in a chronological way. This woman did a really interesting thing. Is she made, in effect, a surprise party for her daughter for her 21st birthday. She made these life cues, put in her own life cues, then emailed it around to friends, and they all came and added their own memories and their own photos, and then they presented this to her on her 21st birthday, and it was like having a surprise party. So people are doing interesting things, or like in this case, this is a memorial for someone who died, and then they made a, after he died, they made a, this is someone I knew, a scholarship fund. And so then what we did after that is we turned the timeline into a way of showing who the winners of the scholarship funds were. So it's kind of became a way of connecting the recipients with the original person who had died. So, and it's really just changed the way people, I think about these life stories, like, and even announcements. So this is an example of someone who started off using this kind of like a birth announcement, like you'd see on Facebook or in the newspaper. And then after the basic announcement, she started using it as really a journal of the baby's first year. And each time she had a particular moment, she could put in multiple photos, and just became a really great way of organizing things and sharing it with family members and that kind of thing. Here's one that I did for my son's college graduation. We've had people do anniversary of sobriety, wedding anniversaries, retirements, things like weddings themselves, major birthdays. Someone has a 75th birthday, 80th birthday. It's kind of, that old sad thing people always say at funerals of it was a shame that he couldn't be here to hear this. Well, you can now. You can create birthday celebrations that enable all these different people to come together, post their own photos and stories, and show it to the honoree. So that's the gist of what we're doing and how the tools use. Oh, here's a memorial for this is our first bear. We've had many dogs and cats and one pig, and this just came in as our first bear. That's a good milestone in itself. And we're working with both directly to consumers and also with organizations like media partners. We had have had a big partnership with Huffington Post, who's used a kind of widget version of our tools. We've done similar things with the Pet Loss Center and Channel 5, NBC in Chicago, and American Public Media, and various other media properties. So we're both a platform and ultimately kind of a media company as well. So that's the gist of what we're trying to do. We didn't start off saying, we have a bunch of photos, what can we do with them? We rather said we have a bunch of lives, how can we capture them and tell their stories? And of course it ends up being mostly, photographs are key to it. And we have our own kind of distinctive way of providing the storytelling tools to make it a bit easier. So why don't I stop there and see if you have any questions.
Perfect, Steve. That is such a great overview. I think now many of the folks that are in attendance will be able to better understand why we thought this would be such a great opportunity to present here in this format. Steve, I've got one question, and then James, I think you're going to monitor the questions as they come in as well. I've got one question that right off the bat, many of the folks that attend these particular webinars are individuals that work with others. Now they may have their own collections and their friends and family, but they may also be doing it for others as part of an organizational process or that type of thing. And I guess the question is there some tips that you might be able to give to them of how they could incorporate this into some of the offerings that they're doing to help them organize the stories and that type a little bit better?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it can be anywhere from, simple to complex. One thing we've been talking to hospice centers about is they told us, we already attempt in the hospice setting to try to get people to tell stories. I met with a hospice center the other day that has a deck of cards that they give out to prompt questions and prompt families to talk through things. And so with them, we're working on a system where they could use the Life Cues tool, where they could just basically set up the questions with the person and then have the family members who are sitting around the bed and also others who are far away, tell stories. So that's one way of using the tools in an institutional setting. We've been talking to colleges and universities about using it in the way I showed around creating connections to memorial scholarship funds, things like that. In the case of individuals, you know, it depends a little bit on what the appetite of the individual is. And one of the things we found, and I'm sure the folks who work in this field find all the time, is there are different things that tend to be paralyzing people. And a lot of times the paralysis comes from being conscientious, that they want to get it right. You know, they have a lot of photos or they have a lot of stories and they really want to get it right. And that sort of stops people from starting in the first place. And so for people like that, we tend to say, don't even think of it that way. Remember, this is something you can build over time. There's no rush. Why don't you just answer one question? Answer one question a day, and then tomorrow maybe we'll answer another question. And now for people who are more like high-powered users who aren't intimidated by the process but just want to get in and do it, you know, a common obvious message that relates to the real nature of the internet as opposed to a kind of physical scrapbook is you're never really done. You know, you can just get started, and if you don't like it, you can change it. So we, you know, encourage people to think of it that way, that there's not necessarily an endpoint to this. So we are working with institutions, and I don't know if this is too detailed, but we have a kind of approach to partnerships that we're very interested in pursuing. Well, there are two ways. One is kind of what I showed you with the Huffington Post, and this is sort of it's kind of like a simplified LifePost, a widget that lives on their site. It's just a little piece of code, and you hit submit, and there's this very simple form. They put in a photo, and then it kind of displays in this Pinterest-like mosaic, and it's really nice. And we have others where it's a 3-column, and some where it's 2 columns. And then it's easy for the partner. They can just put it on their site, and then it links off to LifePosts if the people want to do more than this. So if you're working with an institution that thinks, well, gosh, we want to be able to offer these tools like on our site to help people tell the stories, this is probably the easiest way to do it. You can just put we call it a tribute wall tool. It just takes a few minutes to drop it into an empty story template, and then it just comes out looking like this. And there's really not much else to it. They have to approve or reject submissions, but that's just 2 clicks. And it's just a really nice, easy way of setting this up on people's sites. A more elaborate thing that we do is we have partnerships where the partner, we give them a partner code, and the people who are making it can put in the partner code, and then those things are tagged on LifePost so that they'll always have a strip on it, and with a link back to the partner, and it's a kind of a way of connecting them all. So those are 2 specific things related to working with other groups.
Wow, perfect. So I've got a couple other questions. James, are you seeing anything right now, or can I go ahead?
I have a question here for you. It is asking, is there a way to print these to be able to archive them pretty easily?
Great question. The answer to the first part is not really. I mean, you can print it off your browser, but to be honest, it's not that great an experience. We're working hard right now to have a better solution to that, including being able to turn the whole thing into a book, a physical book, or some other form of keepsake. Now, in the meantime, what we've done while we're still working on that part of it is we've made an arrangement with the Internet Archive, which is a nonprofit group that is used by state governments and the Library of Congress and Smithsonian to create digital archival versions of things. And it's funny because we used to think the internet itself was the archive, and now we realize that doesn't really work that way. Things, you know, things disappear, things degrade. So we make archival copies of the public LifePosts over on the Internet Archive, so that as a kind of a backup, so that if something happened to LifePost, all your hard work would be not lost. It would be archived over there. And then hopefully in the next year, we'll have a better way to create a nice printout. I mean, as I said, you can go and print it out just by going, up to clicking File on your browser and then clicking Print. But it's a bit messy.
Well, it sounds like you're making some great progress. Steve, when you first started, you mentioned that you had been a journalist, and I guess I'm just kind of interested with how much flexibility with these life cues you would have if we were working with folks. Can you adjust the life cues, or is that only if you're in a partnership to prompt people to help tell their stories a little bit more the way, I guess, direct them in the way you'd like to go?
Yeah, you can create the life posts, the life cues, however you want, and it's set up so we pre-populate them just to kind of get it going. But I'll just show you live here how easy it is. So so these are the ones for that are kind of would be here when you first got here. But let's say, okay, I don't like the wording on this. Favorite photo of Chester, looking awesome. I don't like the word awesome, so I'm going to change it to looking adorable. Save, and there it is. And that's fixed. If you don't like any of those, you can hit add a question and add a completely different one of and there it is.
I got it.
So, so for institutions, like this is something we were talking about with the hospice center we're working with, said, look, you have experience with knowing what questions work. By all means, you can ditch all these questions that we have here and just put your own in. It's, whatever works, and we did set it up to be easy to change. These are just here to, kind of get your juices flowing, but you can customize that, and anyone can do that. That's not just through partnerships.
So if you were working with a client and, say, helping them build a historical recreation of their life story, you could almost prompt your client or your family member with the questions that you kind of are looking for answers for, maybe even include a photograph to kind of spur their memory, or an audio clip or a video, and then let them collaborate with you right there, and then you could amalgamate all those contributions into a final product.
Yeah, that's a great way of doing it. I mean, especially if you have a sense of, where you want them to be looking or how to get them going. I think in the case of this one, he clearly wrote his own questions here. Well, I think What Did William Teach You may have been one of ours, but then he wrote these other ones. And then he kind of put out the call. In this case, it wasn't a professional thing, but it was to his particular group of friends and relatives that he wanted, answers. And you can actually, you can have them all go to the client, but you can also have the client, if they want, then send one question to one set of friends and another question to another set of friends. So you can get granular with it.
Which leads me to another question. I've seen it kind of, I think you were very clear, but maybe if you just take another moment and explain again. I mean, I've been through it with you, the difference between this and, let's say, Facebook, but I also saw that you can also push out to Facebook and some of the other social media tools. So maybe you could share a few moments with that.
Right. So there are here, it's kind of all over the site, but in this case, you just click on that and it says waiting for Facebook. Okay, there it goes. And you can write something. I won't actually send this one since this is a real live post, but and then that would just share it right over onto your Facebook page. The other thing that's very cool about the Facebook integration that we're very excited about is we have it set up so that when you're putting the photos in, you can obviously load photos right from your computer. This will look familiar like any other digital photo thing, and you can do video and audio and documents. But you also can go right into your Facebook. So these are live photos on my current Facebook feed, my Facebook albums, and you can just pull those right over and add it right into the LifePost. So you don't have to re-upload everything. If you've already loaded these photos in Facebook, you can just tag them and pull them over into LifePost without having to start all over again.
Perfect. That is a really cool feature. You've mentioned that you started this with Memorialization because of the newspapers, and we recently had that experience with my mom passing away and having to deal with that, and we got our little clip and we got our $500 bill for the picture and the paragraph, and at the end, that's all we got. It was a newspaper clipping. And your wife is working in the funeral business. I guess I would love to hear a little bit more about the collaboration you two have been having as you've been developing this.
Well, I have she's my best advisor and editor and collaborator, so she literally, as a kind of point of differentiation and service for the people who she's working with, she makes LifePosts for everyone who comes in to have a funeral with her, and she's gotten a fantastic reaction to it. And it's sort of a surprise. They're not really expecting it. I think our expectations have been sort of lowered as to what you can get around the time of death from either the newspaper or the funeral home. So this is one, for instance, that that Amy, my wife, did for a woman here in Brooklyn that she did the funeral for, and it just I love this because it looks like the sort of timeline you might see on a news website for some famous person who died, but this is just a regular person here locally, and it also, so we kind of, what Amy tends to do is she kind of gets the ball rolling. She creates a basic LifePost based on the photos she has and what she knows, and then turns it over to them and says, you can do take this on for yourself. So you can see here, these are comments that people posted about this nice, very interesting woman. And I think that one of the nice things that happens, one of the things we were trying to get was for people to move past condolences, and in addition to condolences, tell stories. And I think because this site is a storytelling site, is a kind of biographical site in some way, it also encourages people, I think, to share their own stories. So you can see once Amy got the ball rolling, but most of these other names are not Amy's. These are just friends, the husband, and they kind of take it over. In fact, we have a setting. When you create a LifePost, you're the creator of it. But we created an additional setting called co-creator, where it's basically someone who has all the same administrative roles and powers that the creator does. So maybe the widow starts this thing but doesn't really have the time or knowledge or emotional wherewithal right then to do much more, and she can make the nephew or the son or whatever a co-creator, and they can just do anything that the creator can. They can edit, they can delete posts if they don't like them, and the contributors and friends can do a lot as well, but the co-creators are can help manage it. So that's the way Amy has tended to use it. And then, of course, conversely, it's like an ongoing focus group that I have in my living room of hearing from her, like, this didn't really work that well for us. Or it was too hard to change the life cue. Or, we need a better way for someone who's just died to get the funeral information out there. So I kind of get pretty regular suggestions for improvements based on the experience she's having working with families.
Well, that's great feedback, and one of the things that I know you and I spoke about before when we initially met, Steve, was many of the folks that are attending today are, as I said, doing work not only for their family, their own collections, and their friends, but they're doing it for others, and that co-creator would maybe allow them the opportunity to initiate a process that they maybe have already been contracted for, and they see a story developing or a key person or something that somebody wants to celebrate. I also saw this as a very sophisticated digital asset management system for the individual. And our business here at Easy Photoscan, we have a tendency to spend a lot of our time working with institutions, businesses. And they have lots of photos and they have lots of stories. Most businesses have a designated historian, and that's the dude who's been there for the longest usually. And they usually have their boxes of photos, and they love to get them out and tell the stories. But what you're telling me here now at this point with the tribute wall tool and this type of thing, there's actually a way to partner with LifePosts to get the story initiated and then a place to store it. And you could take any digital asset really and put it in here at this point.
Yeah, you really can, and it's sort of set up to be anything from simple to really power users. Sometimes what I'm doing, if I'm doing one and I have a lot of photos, I'll just take 100 photos and just load them all in at once. And there's essentially you have your own personal library that gets created around each of these. So here's the library, and this has all the photos that I've loaded in on this. But that's just this particular memorial. I can then see all the photos I loaded in for other memorials, and it just is a way, makes it easier for me to manage all this and distribute it properly and change my mind. And then, I'm happy to tell you a little more about the way the tribute wall works. It's essentially, when we first started working with partners, we got some feedback, which was that we really love, what you're doing here, but in some ways the tools you've made are overkill for us. We need something a little bit simpler. We just want people to have the ability right on our site
Muted.
This is a place where you can embellish it if you want to add video, or if you want to add multiple photos, if you want to invite friends and family, because none of that can happen on the tribute wall. Tribute wall is a simple single picture, single text block thing. So that's kind of the way we're using the tribute wall, and I think the partners really like. It's kind of a twofer. Like, they get to control the experience initially. They give a simple, straightforward offering. It creates a sense of community, I think, to have like the different members, different people all in one place. But then they can also offer their clients or members the ability to have a richer experience if they want it. And then from our point of view, of course, it's a good way of finding people, a kind of marketing thing for us to, generate leads.
Perfect. So I have a couple other questions that have come in, and one is, and I'll kind of give them to you 1, 2, and 3, and see if you can maybe deal with them all at once here. One is, how do you handle video on the site? And the other one is, what about the privacy of the information? Can you limit who, I guess they want to know, can you limit access to who has access to it, or is it just out there in the public domain? And there was one other one here. Oh yeah, and then somebody was going to get to the last part, but we were going to ask, they said, because I assume this is a subscription, could you tell us about the costing and that type of thing? So I'll turn those three questions to you, the video and the privacy and the costing.
So video, you basically, anywhere you see that kind of media, the little camera icon, and you click on that, and basically the process works the same way as if you were loading a photo, except when you get to the media picker, you go to video, you can either load it directly as a video from your computer or your phone, and then we'll, encode it ourselves. Actually, we use Vimeo does it through a Vimeo integration. Or you can do that from Facebook, just pull the Facebook videos you already have, or YouTube. And the way it works with YouTube, actually, this is YouTube or Vimeo. In that case, you just put the link from YouTube, and it'll just pull in automatically. So those are the different ways that you can use video. And currently, there's no limit on how much time, how many hours or minutes of video you can use. On privacy, there's 3 privacy settings. You can, I'll even go to the beginning of the process. So here, if you see, when you're first getting going, and right here is the privacy setting. It's public, private, or semi-public. And semi-public, you can see the definitions here, but private is only invited guests can read or contribute, and there's a sort of invitation system and a permissioning system. In the case of public, anyone can see it. You still have to be a registered user to contribute, just to cut down on, there not being spam. But it's open to anyone to read, and then semi-public is in between, where anyone can read it, but only people you invite can. Now I would say about 2/3 of people are doing it public and 1/3 are doing it private. And either one is fine with us. It's a sort of a different experience. The people who are private, it's usually a more closely held thing with family members, and the people who are doing public would like to share it on Facebook and have a broader range of people see it. But it's flexible. You can do it either way. So in terms of price, I would love to get actually feedback from you on this. So right now we're free. Everything is free. So that's got to change.
So everybody in the audience will love that.
Yes. And if you create your LifePost now, it's free, and the LifePost you create is grandfathered in for when we eventually do charge. So what we're going to start charging in February, and we are still figuring out the exact contours of it, but a few things I think we're pretty clear on. We're not going to do this as a subscription, at least initially. We're going to try doing it with a one-shot payment forever, where you don't, because I just find these subscriptions are, to me, it feels exploitative. Like you create this memorial for someone, and after a year, even if you don't want to add to it, you just want to keep it up on the internet, you have to pay them for that. I don't know. That just rubbed me the wrong way. So we're going to try it a different way of just one payment. You pay once, and you get it forever, and can use it as much as you want forever. And it would be per milestone. So you pay once if you do your dog memorial, you pay another time if you do a wedding, and that's kind of the way we're thinking of doing it. We may have tiers to it. There may be some tiers, but that's the basic idea. it's always going to be free to read. So even if even if you decide to choose a kind of lower tier and you just want to get something simple and you're going to pay a low price, you're not going to do anything else ever again, it's still always going to be on the internet and it's always going to be free to read. So that's what we're thinking of. We haven't decided the price yet. We haven't decided exactly how to slice it, like what part's the low price, what part's the high price. We were thinking of, actually I could use you all as a focus group. We were thinking of something like you have a week to just have the run of the place, use the tools, figure out what you want to do, and if you make something and you just want to make a small thing and that's it, and you don't think you're going to be coming back to it or inviting more people and you're happy with what you've done, then you pay one price, a small price. That'll be like, I don't know, $8 or something very low. And then, but the main price, the price for using the site in an ongoing way forever, would then be a second price, and we're looking at anything from like $25 to $75. I think we'll test that out. All of which is still like an incredible bargain compared to newspaper death notice, which are up, as you said, in the $500, $600 range. So it's more money than free, which is you can do on Facebook, but it's a lot less money than the newspapers and a lot of the other kind of online memorialization and storytelling tools. I am very curious to hear what you think of that. We would love, because we're right in the thick of deciding how to do that, and we'd love any feedback you have on that.
Well, I tell you what we're going to do. We've got a list of folks, and at the end here, Steve, we'll have them, if they want to send us a message. It's actually in our email that we'll follow up tomorrow. If they want to send us back a reply, if you guys want to have input into that, please, by all means, send us back a reply as to what you're thinking, or if you want to get in touch with Steve as well. Steve, I know there's one thing I want to make sure that folks understand, and then I'll get your kind of official reading on it, but lots of the folks that we deal with are individuals that are working with trying to create archives or preserving photographs for individuals. I know you've got to deal with the folks from Internet Archives. We love those guys. They're fantastic, and they're doing a fantastic job. And we contribute to them every single year to make sure that they can continue to do their job of Internet archiving. But one of the things is this tool is a memorial. It's not necessarily been created as the archive that you would put all my original photographs at high resolution, keep them there for, say, forever. Is that a true statement?
Yeah, I think that's true. It can be used that way, but it's sort of not the way we were focused more on, like, okay, you have all these photos, how can you use them well? There's no reason why you can't do that, and in fact, at least the way we've set up our price structure, for better or worse, it's kind of unlimited, so you could put in a lot of photos. We might regret that decision someday, but there might be other sites that are really 100% geared toward just storing photos that might have some bells and whistles that we don't have, of having more control of the resolution or things like that. So I don't really know. There may be things that we don't do that might be important for that kind of line of work.
But it's mostly for storing stories. Question came up: do you compress the images when you put them up there?
Yes. So we compress the images to make them lighter, so they work on mobile and on desktop. But we are also saving copies of the original high-res photos, so they're in the system. And so when we get to the point of having the ability to turn it into a book, for instance, where you're going to want to go back potentially to the higher res photos, we'll have them and can use some of the higher res photos. But the short answer is yes, we do compress it because otherwise, the site would grind to a halt, and it would be a very bad experience, especially on the phone.
And one other question with regards to photographs up in the quote-unquote addict of today, the cloud. What are the rights to these photographs? And have you addressed that? Is this something that you're going to go? Is LifePost intending to take all our best photos and sell them to some gallery, and we'll see them for sale somewhere, or what's the story with the photographs?
So you have the rights to all the material you put on there. I saw some newspaper sites were saying that the families didn't even own the rights to their own death notices, which I thought was kind of outrageous. Now, we also, in our terms of service, do say that if you're making a public LifePost, that we reserve the right to share that. Now, that's not with the purpose of selling the photos off to people, but it's with the purpose of potentially sharing it and syndicating it. So, we might, like we've been talking to Huffington Post about doing something where we're taking particularly interesting LifePosts and putting them on Huffington Post. So we haven't really done that yet, but we do say in the terms of service that if you're making the public, we have the right to do that. That may be something we revisit. It's not something we're even really doing right now, so I don't want people to kind of get scared off by that, since it's not really that big a deal for us. But that was if you look carefully at our terms of service, it does leave us the right to use material for public LifePosts, and that was the reason why is we wanted to be able to place these things on other media partners' websites.
All right. Well, James, do you see any other questions?
There's nothing that I see here, Rick, that you didn't cover. I think you got them all, and in the course of answering his other answers, he covered the rest that I found as well.
Well, perfect. Well, Steve, we want to thank you so much for joining us today, and we would invite everybody out there to jump over to lifeposts.com and create your own LifePost. Get a story, get started with it. I saw a great potential if we were working with clients, especially I know in 2017 we've got a number of business clients that we are going to be working with, and they wanted to tell their story, and we thought this would be a terrific tool for them to get started with, as well as some individuals. So there's all sorts of different opportunities. Steve, thank you so much. If they need to get a hold of you specifically, is there an info@lifepost.com email or something they can
Yes, there is. Info@lifepost.com, but also anyone on this call can just email me directly at steve@lifepost.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining us, and we want to thank everybody for attending today. We wish you a happy holiday season. We don't want you to forget that in January, kind of on the same theme of this scrapbooking and collecting the mosaic of different types of materials, we're going to be looking at those traditional scrapbooks and the digitization of them, and we've got a fantastic program set up for you from somebody who's been doing it for years, and she's going to unlock some of the secrets to how to do what she does. And so if you've ever been challenged with digitizing a scrapbook or traditional scrapbook, you do not want to miss the next presentation on January the 10th. So thank you all. We appreciate it, and this concludes this session.
Thank you.